Welcome class. Today we are going to talk about region and country analysis of major producing and exporting countries. And when we say producing and exporting countries, we will be concentrating on textile and clothing primarily. The content for this session, we have taken the period as 2009 to 2018, 10 years, and all the values that we'll be talking about will be in US dollars. The four major parts to this session are major apparel producing and exporting countries. We are going to talk about them. We are also going to discuss in detail about major textiles producing and exporting countries. And while we are looking at the facts and figures, we will also be doing the analysis to gauge what are the changes, the major and minor changes in the last decade that has happened in the exports of textile and clothing amongst the major exporting countries. And then we are going to talk about the changes in the export patterns of textiles and apparel. How do they compare with each other and how have they changed over the period of 2009 to 2018, which is 10 years. So first section, major clothing exporting countries. First we look at the snapshot of the global trade in merchandise and then in textiles and apparel. And what we see is that the global merchandise exports stood at $12.5 trillion in 2009, which increased to $19.4 trillion, which is roughly about 60% in 2018. That was much before COVID-19 came into picture. And if you look at the growth from 2009 to 2018, the growth in overall merchandise exports has been 55%. If you talk about textiles, 2009, $212 billion worth of textiles were exported by all the countries together, and which increased to $313 billion, which is roughly 47% growth over the figure that we have in 2009. 2018, the global textile exports stood at $313 billion. And if we come to apparel, apparel is more than textiles. Apparel exports is more than textile exports in 2009. When textiles stood at $212 billion, apparel stood at $318 billion. And if you look at 2018, textiles stood at $313 billion, whereas apparel climbed to $494 billion, again ahead of textiles. And if you look at the growth rates of textile and apparel, textiles, it grew at the rate of 47% between 2009 to 2018, whereas if you compare the figures of apparel exports in 2009 and 2018, there has been a growth of 55%. So what we can clearly see is that during this entire decade of 2009 to 2018, apparel exports has been higher than textiles, and it has also grown at a higher rate as compared to the rate at which textiles has grown. One of the major reasons being that apparel happens to be a value added product and has fetched more margins for the manufacturers or for the exporters, whereas the margins in case of textiles have been lesser. So to say, the textile manufacturing countries, they have taken to converting the textiles to apparel and then exporting rather than exporting the textiles. So the trend of exporting lesser of textiles and exporting more of apparel has been on the rise, and that is what is clearly evident in this table, which shows the global textiles and apparel exports between the year 2009 to 2018. Here we have the table which shows the major exporting countries. Now we are looking at top 10 countries of the world, top 10 countries which have exported the highest value of clothing in 2018. So the data has been taken from WTO, and keeping 2018 as the base year, the top 10 exporters were identified, which are China, Bangladesh, Vietnam, Italy, Germany, India, Turkey, Spain, Hong Kong and France. So 2018 the top 10 were China to France, and once these top 10 countries were frozen, then the data for these 10 countries have been taken for the preceding years, which is 2017, 16, 15 till 2009. So right now in front of you is the data for the top 10 exporters of clothing in 2018. Those top 10 countries, what were their export figures from 2009 to 2017 and then 2018. And just to give you a reference, the export figures of clothing worldwide has also been included in the second row, so that you get a good perspective of what do these figures mean. So if you look at China in 2018, China did $157.8 billion worth of clothing exports. Now how much is that? Is it large, or is it mediocre? Is it less? So until unless we have the world figures, you would not be able to make out as to whether China is one of the largest or one of those lesser clothing exporting nation. So if you see, world did to $494 billion of clothing exports in 2018, whereas China did $157 billion. That is somewhere around 1/3 of the total world exports. So we can see that China occupies about 30%, a good 30% of the total clothing exports in the world. And of course, second is Bangladesh at $32.9 billion worth of clothing exports in 2018, which is 1/5 of what China does. But then Bangladesh happens to be number 2 position when we look at the top 10 countries exporting clothing. Of course, if you see India, which is much larger than Bangladesh, India occupies 6th position, and India did $16.6 billion worth of clothing exports in 2018. Now, when we see this top 10 list of countries, it's a very mixed bag, because China happens to be a developed nation now, but it's in Asia. Bangladesh is in Asia, but then it's a developing nation. And Vietnam again is a developing nation, very small. Bangladesh also very small. Both these countries are small, but then in clothing exports they are very high. So it can be safely said that a large part of the economy of Bangladesh and Vietnam is driven by clothing exports. If you look at Italy and Germany, Italy and Germany, these are European countries, developed nations, mature nations, experiencing difficulty in the sense that their economies have not been growing as fast as the Asian countries, many of the Asian countries. And Italy and Germany, they have been growing, their economies have been growing between 0% to 1%, as low as that. If you look at India, India is a developing nation and has been growing at a very healthy rate, between 5 to 9% in the between 2000 to 2010, and has been able to maintain its position from 5th position. It has been able to maintain its position as clothing exporter at the 7th position in 2018. Turkey is in between Europe and Asia. Turkey happens to be the easternmost country of Europe, which touches Asia. Turkey has been there for the entire decade and has been able to maintain its position. Spain is extreme westernmost country of Europe, other than Portugal. And Spain again is a developed nation, and yet we can clearly see that it has grown at a very rapid pace. In 2009, it exported $7.1 billion of clothing, and which increased to $15.2 billion in 2018, which is more than double. So Spain happens to be a developed nation, which has exhibited a very fast growth in clothing exports, in sharp contrast to Italy and Germany. Italy grew from 19.6 to 25.4, and Germany grew from 17 to 24, which is less than 50%, whereas Spain has grown by more than 100%. And if you look at China, Hong Kong is a province of China, and this is an exception in this entire top 10 list. Hong Kong has been continuously decreasing, and if you see, it exported $22.8 billion worth of clothing in 2009, which has fell sharply to $13.9 billion in 2018, which is a negative growth. And France is a European nation, Western European nation, very developed, and despite its high cost of living and other vagaries that come along with development, France has still been able to maintain its position in the top 10 list of clothing exports. Although it would be very pertinent to say that France has been the pioneer of fashion, of design, and has been the biggest driver of fashion in the world, and therefore has contributed largely to the health and well-being of fashion trade in the world since last 2 centuries. So that brings us to the conclusion of this slide, where we see in clear terms the 10 countries belonging to Asia as well as Europe, some developed, some very highly developed, and if you talk about Asia, we also have some very lesser developed countries. All of them have their position in the top 10 list. Come to slide number 6, and we are looking at top 10 clothing exporting countries year-wise from 2009 to 2018, and all the figures are in billion dollars, US dollars. The period is 2009 to 2018, and for every year the top 10 countries have been taken, top 10 such countries which are the highest exporter of clothing. So meaning to say that 2009, those countries which were the top 10 highest clothing exporters, they have been taken in 2009. In 2010, the list has changed. China is there, Hong Kong, Italy, Germany is there, but India, which was on the 5th position in 2009, instead of that, we have Bangladesh on the 5th position in 2010. And similarly, Bangladesh was at number 6 position in 2009. It jumped to position number 5 in 2010. So this table shows the top 10 countries year-wise. So 2009 top 10 countries, 2010 top 10 countries, along with the corresponding clothing exports figures in US billion dollars. So from 2009 to 2018, we can see that the position of the countries have changed. China has remained on the top from 2009 right till 2018, has dominated the top position throughout. Hong Kong has been at the 2nd position from 2009 to 2012, and then it fell to the 4th position in 2013. And then finally we see that Hong Kong has slipped down to the ninth position in 2018. Italy and Germany and India have seem to have maintained their position, lost positions by one step. So Italy has come down from third position to fourth position. Germany has slipped from fourth to fifth position, and India has slipped from fifth to sixth position. And the gainers are Bangladesh, which has jumped from sixth position in 2009 to second position in 2018. And Turkey has been able to maintain its position. It has maintained its seventh position throughout. A couple of years it has lost or gained position, but so far it has maintained its position. France has lost its position from 8th and has slipped to the 10th position, but it has maintained its 10th position since 2013 till 2018. And Vietnam is another black horse, just like Bangladesh. Vietnam has jumped from 9th position in 2009 to 4th position in 2018. Vietnam happens to be growing at the highest growth rate, whereas even higher than Bangladesh. Belgium is one such exception, just like Hong Kong. Hong Kong has come down to 9th position. Belgium actually in 2009 and 10 was at 10th position, and it has actually gone out of the top 10 position. And instead it has been replaced by Spain. Spain being a developed nation, still the clothing manufacturing and exporting activity has steadily increased, and we see that Spain has entered the top 10 slot in 2011, and then gradually in 2013, 14, 15 and 16 and 17 it has gained one position. It has gone to ninth position, and in 2018 it has reached the 8th position, despite being part of Europe, despite being a developed nation, and despite its high cost of living. It has still been able to produce clothing at competitive prices, and has been able to export so much that today it occupies the 8th position in 2018. Now we look at the table in which the countries have been placed as per their volume, as per the value that they have exported. So this table has been derived from the previous slide, and is the same table with the list of countries without the export figures, and very clearly we can see that China has maintained the position, Hong Kong has come down, India has lost its position few times, and then finally from 5th position it has come down to the 6th position in 2018. And we can clearly see that Bangladesh has jumped from 6th position to 2nd position, and Vietnam has jumped from 9th position to 3rd position. Now based on the data for 2009 to 2018 top 10 countries, these are the inferences. All the countries have experienced growth in the period 2009 to 18 except Hong Kong. All the countries have, whether they have lost positions or gained position, but their export figures, the clothing export figures, have increased. Only Hong Kong happens to be the region which has lost business in the period 2009 to 2018. We can also see that in the years 2015 and 16, the world exports for clothing has fallen, and the same can be seen for all the countries in the top 10 list. All the countries have experienced decreased clothing exports except Bangladesh and Vietnam, which even in 2015 and 16 they experienced increased exports despite the world falling, despite all the other countries falling. And India has been able to save its face, uh, so much so that India has maintained its clothing exports at $18 billion in 2014, and 2015 and 16 again it has maintained $18 billion. The clothing exports for India has not decreased, just uh, uh, just like world and other countries. And the growth data in USD billion, if you see, Bangladesh was on $25 billion in 2014, which instead of reducing it actually increased to 27 in 2015 and to $29 billion in 2016. And Vietnam increased from $20 billion to $22 billion in 2015 and further increased to $23 billion in 2016. Now this is an exception, and it can actually be seen that Bangladesh and Vietnam have been the strongest players in the decade 2009 to 18, and they have been growing rapidly in terms of clothing exports. These two countries are not to be ignored by any economist or any scholar of international business. Further, we see that Belgium occupied the 10th position in 2009 and 10, in which actually was replaced by Spain, and Belgium is out of the top 10 league since 2011. The top 10 list contains the same countries. This one is peculiar. The top 10 list contains pretty much the same countries throughout 2009 to 18. Only Belgium is the country which got out, and Spain is the country which entered the top 10. Otherwise, all the other 9 countries are the same. If you talk about China, Italy, Germany, India, Turkey and France, they have kind of maintained their positions to an extent. And if you talk about rapid increases, Bangladesh and Vietnam, they have jumped multiple positions. And Hong Kong and Belgium, Hong Kong by far is the biggest loser. It has lost its position from 2nd to 9th, and Belgium actually got out of the top 10 league in 2010, and 2018 it occupies the 12th position. Now we will look at another angle, another perspective. If we see the top 10 clothing exporting countries in 2009-2018, and if you look at the growth figures, now till now we were looking at the absolute value in terms of US dollars. Now if we look at them, the top 10 countries, in terms of the growth in percentages, and keeping 2009 as the base year and ranking as per 2018, the calculation has been shown. Now what we are saying here is that we have taken 2009 as the base year, and as on during 2018 we have taken the list of top 10 countries. So the top 10 countries of 2018 clothing exporting countries, they have been taken, their export figures have been taken, and for these 10 countries the export figures have been taken for 2009 also, and with reference to the business, the clothing exports done by these countries in 2009, with reference to that we have calculated the growth rate. So we took top 10 in 2018, China being the first one, which had exported $158 billion worth of clothing exports. It had done $107 billion in 2009. So similarly for other countries, the figures have been taken, and if you see the growth percentages, the highest growth percentage has been exhibited by Vietnam. It has grown from $9 billion in 2009 to $28 billion in 2018, marking a growth of 232%, far higher than any other country in the top 10 list. And second in position is Bangladesh, which is 177%. It grew from $12 billion of clothing exports in 2009 to $33 billion in 2018. Another such anomaly is Spain. Again, part of Europe, Western Europe, well developed. It did $7 billion in 2009, which increased to $15 billion, more than doubled, and exhibited a growth of 113%. Now, when we're looking at these top growers, we should also see that the world has grown by 55% in clothing exports. The total world clothing exports was $318 billion in 2009, which increased to $494 billion in 2018, with a growth of 55%. Now, if you look at Italy, Germany, India, Turkey, and France. Now, Italy, Germany, Turkey, France, these are all European countries. India is an Asian country. Now, all of these countries have exhibited a growth rate of anywhere between 29% to 42%. Now, these countries have been seen to have kind of maintained their positions, maybe lost one position, and their growth rates, of course, they are less than the growth rate of the world clothing exports. And that's why we see that Italy, Germany, India, Turkey, and France, all of them have lost one position between 2009 to 2018. And the biggest gainers have been Bangladesh, Vietnam, and Spain. So, as a researcher, it is so important to see, to find out the reason why Vietnam has grown so fast, and same for Bangladesh. And it's also very important to find out how Spain has been able to grow at such a rapid pace, while the other European countries, Germany and Italy and Turkey, they have not been able to grow at the same pace. And same for France. Now, there's one more perspective which I have added, and that perspective is sum total of exports. Now, so far, what we have done is that we have seen the export figures for the top 10 countries for 2009 and for 2009, 10, 11 till 2018. And we have done the comparison in terms of how much was the export in 2018 with reference to the exports which was done in 2009. We have also seen some of these sharp increases or sharp decreases in the export figures amongst various countries. Hong Kong has gone out, Bangladesh, Vietnam has gone up, and there are so many other countries, the rest of the countries, which have fallen in the year 2015 and 16. Now, after having seen all of that, it also is very important to see that what is the total amount of business which any country has done in that entire period, which is 2009 to 2018. So maybe if a country does very good in 2009 and in 2018, but in between has not done very well, the calculation may say that the country has grown by a certain percentage, or it could be vice versa, that the company has gone down by a very large percentage. So, to evaluate the actual position and the actual situation, it's important to look at the data from various angles. And that's why we look at the positions, we also look at the trade figures, and then we look at the rankings, and then we look at how the rankings have changed. We also look at the export figures, how have they changed over this decade. And at the same time, it also becomes important to look at the overall total business which has been done by these top 10 countries in the period 2009 to 2018. So what the table that we see over here shows world, the total export is $4,300 billion, $4.3 trillion. So what we are saying, what we have done is we have added the total exports of the world for 2009, 10, 11, so on and so forth till 2018. Same for China. China's clothing export figures for 2009, 10, 11, 12 till 2018, all of them have been added, and we have got the figure of $1.563 trillion. Same for Bangladesh. Bangladesh, its export figures since 2009 till 2018, all of them added together gives us $231 billion. So this table in front of you shows the top 10 countries in terms of the total business done between 2009 to 2018, and we see still China is at the top slot with $1.563 trillion. Bangladesh is at number 2, $231 billion. Italy is at $226 billion. Hong Kong is $199 billion, even though it has been continuously decreasing. Germany is $189 billion. Vietnam, which has been increasing at very fast pace and now happens to occupy the third slot. If we do the total for Vietnam for the 10 years, it is $182 billion, which is 6th position. India is currently at 6th position. In 2018. India was at 5th position in 2009. On an average, when we see the total amount of business, the total business which India has done from 2009 to 2018 in terms of clothing exports is $157 billion. And Turkey is $146 billion, Spain is $112 billion, and France is $111 billion. And what we have seen earlier is that China has maintained its position, though it has been growing at the rate of 42%. Bangladesh has shown rapid growth, has increased by 113%, and Italy has lost a couple of places, still happens to be the third largest exporter if we do the summation of all the export figures between 2009 to 2018. Again, Hong Kong has been losing position continuously, but still has managed $199 billion in 10 years. Germany is 189. Vietnam was very less in 2009, has been growing rapidly, and that's why we see Vietnam as 6th position in the cumulative table with $182 billion in its kitty, and India is at 7th position, $157 billion. So what we are saying here is that when we are doing our analysis for a particular period, let's say 5 years or 10 years, we should also see the total amount of business done by any particular country in that given period, and then do the top 10 list. That top 10 list is going to reveal new things. We come to slide number 12, and this is one more perspective. What has been done here is that the top 10 exporters, what has been done here is that the summation has been done for the 10 years as we have done in the last slide, and we have taken these top 10 countries, and we have also juxtaposed on the left side, on the right side, the amount of exports done by these countries in 2009. So meaning to say that we add the export values for 10 years and then we find out the top 10. Once we have the top 10 and their cumulative figures for 10 years, then we have taken the clothing export figures for those top 10 countries for 2009, and we have taken 2009 as the base year, which has been titled as B. And now what we have done is we have divided A by B, meaning to say Vietnam, the total exports in the last 10 years is $182 billion. Vietnam did $8.5 billion in 2009. We have divided the total business done by Vietnam in 10 years. We have divided that by the amount of business that Vietnam did in 2009, which is $8.5 billion. And we get a figure of 21.4. So if you see, we have the 10 years figure for these top 10 countries. We also have the export figures for these top 10 countries for 2009, and then we have divided this summed figures by the base year figure, and we've got the ratio A divided by B. And what we see here is that Vietnam is on the top with 21.4 as the ratio, which means Vietnam has done the highest amount of business as compared to the amount of business it had done in 2009. Bangladesh at number 2. Bangladesh did $11.9 billion in 2009, and in the period 2009 to 2018 it did 19.4 times the business it had done in 2009. So from 2009, if you see how much of business, let's say I did 100 rupees worth of business in 2009, how much business did I do? How many times of business did I do between 2009 to 2018? So if we see for China did $107 billion in 2009, and if we see the entire business that it did from 2009 to 2018, it is 14.6 times the business that it did in 2009. So this is one more interesting analysis which reveals that if you see the world has grown by 13.5 times when we look at its figures in 2009. The world clothing exports was $318 million, and in the next 10 years world did $4,300 billion, which is 13.5 times the business which was done in 2009. And if you see, the figures are less, the ratio is the ratio for India, Turkey, Italy, Germany, France. These ratios are less than the ratio of the world, which is 13.5. Now this is very similar to, and this pretty much correlates with the previous slides, where the total growth rate of India, Turkey, Italy, Germany, France was between 29 to 38%, whereas world had grown by 40%, and China had world had grown by 55% and China had grown by 42%. So this is again one more analysis which should not be ignored. And then we come to the 13th slide. Here we see we have taken the figures for 2009, we have taken the figures for 2018 for all the countries in the world which export clothing, and then we have taken the growth rate, meaning to say we have taken the export figure for 2018 and how much has the 2018 figure grown versus 2009. And we see that Nicaragua has grown by 1,41,700%, which is very, very high. But then the reason can be only one, which is Nicaragua has been exporting very less amount of clothings, and with respect to that very low base amount, in 2018 the amount of business that it did is roughly 1400 times, and that's why we have this unusual figure. Same for Ethiopia, Armenia, Myanmar, Mozambique, Uganda, South Africa, Eswatini, Russian Federation. Now for the first 6 countries like Nicaragua, Ethiopia till Uganda, these are very poor countries, and if they were exporting worth 1 rupees and if they export worth 100 rupees in next 5 years, the growth percentage would look like 10,000%. That's why we are having these unusual figures. But if you look at the serial numbers 11 to 20, we'll have far more realistic figures of United Arab Emirates 250%, Vietnam which has been growing at very fast pace and which also occupies a very high position, third position in terms of absolute value in clothing exports. It has grown by 232%, and then Bangladesh again is 177%. Now especially Vietnam and Bangladesh have been highlighted because they figure in very small countries, they figure in that list of very high growth rate countries also, and they figure in the top 10 countries in absolute value terms also. So that's why Vietnam and Bangladesh become very important. Now, if we see the top 10 countries, the top 10 countries that you see in slide number 14, these uh, top 20 countries have been taken after sorting the data rank wise in the descending order. The top 20 countries have been taken as on 2018, and their export figures have been taken for 2009 and 2018, and then the growth rate has been calculated. And here we see that the growth rate of Bangladesh and Vietnam, which was there in the highest growth rate also, happened to be number 2 and number 3 respectively, whereas China is the largest exporter of clothing, but it does not figure in the top 20 countries in terms of growth rate, primarily for the fact that China is a very large country. China is a very large exporter of clothing, and it is not possible for China to grow at 10,000% because of its very large base. So, but the commendable fact is that China, despite being having a very large base as an exporter, it still has maintained its growth rate of 47% in the period 2009 to 18. And the same goes for Germany also, which occupies a position in top 10 countries, has been able to grow at the rate of 42% during 2009-18. Of course, far better is Spain, which has grown by 113% in the period 2009 to 2018. And of course, it is not just the top 10 countries which are important, like Italy, Germany, India, and Turkey, and France. Countries like Netherlands, United Kingdom, or Poland, or Sri Lanka, Malaysia, Pakistan. These are these countries have a fairly high growth rates, but they don't figure in the highest growing countries, but they are very important in the global clothing export sector because they've been growing at a fast pace, and they are also very high in terms of the absolute value. So therefore, in this slide, it's important to that the first 10 countries, China, Bangladesh, Vietnam, Italy, Germany, India, Turkey, Spain, Hong Kong, and France, they are important, but at the same time, countries like Netherlands, Belgium, Indonesia, UK, Cambodia, Poland, United States of America, Pakistan, Malaysia, Sri Lanka, all these are also very important. Although Belgium has just 17% growth rate, and and that's also the reason we saw Belgium get out of the top 10 list. It would be interesting to see why Belgium has been decreasing in terms of clothing exports. So with that, we come to the end of this part of the session, where we have talked about we have talked about the major clothing exporting countries and their various perspectives. In the next section of this session, we will be talking about the major textile exporting countries. Thank you.